Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I want to wrap up the hashtag Name the Trait video series, debunking this intricate web of fallacies. You know, I could go on talking and debunking this nonsense for days, but my brain kind of hurts from all the thinking I've been doing. And if you don't accept the reality, if you don't accept what's happening here after seeing this video, you're ideologically possessed, most likely, and there might not be any hope for you. So that's what that is. And yes, dear vegans, veganism kills bunnies too. At least the people that raise them for food don't needlessly waste their carcasses. At any rate, let's quickly recap what we've established so far about Name the Trait. There's some fascinating videos I've been watching. Anyway, so ask yourself, basically what he did is he designed this line of quote-unquote reasoning, this little trick. Or maybe I'm giving him too much credit saying he designed it, but he employs this game that you're not likely to understand the rules thereof, meaning you won't be able to win it because he designed it. He knows how to play it, and he knows it's very difficult to win that game unless you know the rules exactly. And if you do know the rules and you make him play the same game or a version thereof, he can't win either, right? So, because he designed the game and he knows how it works, he has to shift the burden of proof onto you so that you don't put the same line of questioning on him because, well, he'll lose just the same as you will. Again, if you understand how to play the game. Now, I'm not going to get into exactly what that means because you need to watch the first couple of videos in order to understand that clearly. But that's basically what's happening here. Now, let's play the game for just a second, right? So, what the game basically asks you again is to find a trait that essentially justifies a trait that is, if it were absent in humans, the trait that is absent in animals, which if it were absent in humans would cause us to deem ourselves valueless, right? Would give us a moral justification to eat animals. So again, some people have tried intelligence or the lack thereof as that trait, saying that animals aren't as intelligent, thus it's okay to eat them. To which he will obviously respond saying, well, then is it okay to eat a retard who is not as intelligent as the rest of us? At which point you either have to concede that it would seem your line of reasoning is inconsistent and you are a bad person, right? You're morally incorrect. Or you have to agree to that it's okay to eat a retard, in which case he appeals to popularity, another fallacy, by saying, well, most people will think you're a bad person, so you're a bad person, right? He uses this cleverly designed shaming tactic to make you appear like a bad person, right? But again, he can't win this game either because the trait that he proposes is sentience. And if you apply the same logic, he has to agree that it's okay to eat a person in a vegetative state, or be morally inconsistent. So he loses the game just the same, but he doesn't, he does everything he can not to have to play the game, in case you could catch on to the scheme, or in case you do catch on to the scheme and expose his BS like I did. Now, there is an answer if you do decide to play this game, which you shouldn't have to in the first place because the burden of proof is on him. But there is a right answer here, or there is a variable you could plug in that will actually make sense. And Atheism is Unstoppable, a YouTube channel, and a couple other people, I believe, have done exactly that. So what is that trait? Well, obviously the trait is humanity, right? Or if you want to say our DNA, or the fact that we're the only being that could reproduce with one another, or we're one and the same species, right? But to that, he has already crafted another trick answer, which I will promptly debunk. So when you say that, right, what he basically reduces it to, oops, did I just give away my game plan? That's okay. What he reduces your answer to is speciesism, right? That, well, he basically wants to devalue the trait that you propose, because what is speciesism? I'm sure a lot of you are hearing this for the first time. And it's the idea that humans have a moral status superior to animals, just because humans are members of the human species, right? And, speciesism isn't a settled matter in the not scientific, but philosophical community, right? But some people say it's wrong. A lot of people disagree. So it's not even a settled matter. So for him to put that on you, like, that's still debatable whether or not that's wrong, right? But even if we assume that maybe it's wrong, or we consider that argument, not assuming, let's just consider the argument. What is the argument for speciesism? What is it? Well, this trick was actually devised by animal rights activists a while back, vegans, vegetarians basically, to mentally rape you, as Ask Yourself likes to point out sometimes. Well, obviously not with reference to this little trick, but he likes to use that phrase. These vegans talk a lot about rape and other things, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So, speciesism, a lot of people argue, the argument for why it's not preferable morally is, well, because it's like racism, right? Except with regards to species. And a lot of people buy this line of reasoning and agree that speciesism is wrong. At least that's what a vegan might argue, right? But the way to debunk that nonsense is to talk about racism. And in a lot of these vegan versus omnivore debates, the topic of slavery comes up. And this is how to tackle this. Look, why is it? Back in the day, let's just take in the American context, or you could, extrapolate this in general. What rationale did people give, if questioned, for why it was okay to enslave other people? What rationale did we use? Well, in the specific context of North America, we likened black people to apes or monkeys, right? I mean, we considered Italians and the Irish as like a lower life form as well. And whenever we subjugated one another, that's generally the rationale we gave when questioned philosophically, right? This is a lower life form. These people are literally animals. This is why we enslaved them. So the way abolitionists argued for, one of the ways, they argued for why racism is wrong. And yes, the burden of proof was on them, you could say. I don't know, I didn't live back then, so I don't really know what the deal was. But obviously the way to combat that is to say, no, that's not right. These people aren't some kind of a lower life form. They are part of our human species, right? So speciesism was used to debunk racism. Thus, you cannot use racism to try to debunk speciesism. That is the violation of the you can't have your cake and eat it too fallacy. Well, I made that up, but it's a fallacy, right? Because look, you can't have both at the same time. Okay? If you want to say racism is wrong, well, that's because speciesism is correct. But if you want to reject speciesism, then you have to admit that racism is okay. You understand? Clever trick? Maybe not that clever, but a trick nonetheless. Now, so the argument against speciesism, as some of these animal rights activists propose, is actually the exact same argument as name the trait, right? They're basically saying that it's not okay to say that you're different enough from these animals to act like you're moral, because we're all animals, in other words, or we're all part of a larger group, and we should at least to some degree. Man, this fucking rooster better shut the fuck up or I'm gonna chop his head off. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna chop his head off because he's loud. I'm gonna do it because I'm hungry. Joke, guys. No need to get triggered. I'm not gonna chop his head off at all. I'm gonna have my wife do it. Come on, vegans. You can't come over here and call me all kinds of names and attack me and not expect me to have some fun. Right? Anyway, so name the trait is essentially this idea that it tries to push this idea that we're, if not the same, similar. We're similar enough to these animals to where we shouldn't eat them, basically, right? Which is exactly the argument against speciesism, right? We shouldn't eat these animals because we're no better than them, at least with respect to us being able to take their life for ourselves, right? So what Isaac engages in by pushing this inherently flawed idea of speciesism anyway, unless he wants to accept racism, which he doesn't, and that would make him logically inconsistent. You know how he says he hates to do that, even though I'll show you exactly how he is. The concept of speciesism basically invalidates itself, right? You have to choose racism, speciesism. Maybe there's something else there, but maybe there's some kind of middle ground. I'm not saying there isn't, but if racism is used today, or if speciesism essentially was used to debunk racism, you can't at the very least use racism to debunk speciesism now. Maybe there's some other logic to do that, okay? But so again, Isaac engages, once you give the right answer, he has to engage in circular reasoning, right? So to translate basically what happens, you say, well, our DNA or us being part of the same species is the trait, right? He says, no, name the trait. And you say, yeah, I'm naming the trait, species. And he says, no, name the trait. Basically, that's basically his line of reasoning. It's the circular reasonings. The argument against speciesism is essentially the same as the name the trait argument, right? And because he knows that is the right answer, he has to fall back on another fallacy to quote unquote debunk it, Now, how is he able to trick people with this speciesism? Why do a lot of people fall for it? Well, that's because it's another fallacy, actually, as you saw a second ago. Where is this? Did I close it already? There we go. It's another fallacy, and it's the fallacy of the single cause, also known as complex cause, cause oversimplification, causal oversimplification, reductionism, and reduction fallacy. What he does is he basically, and this is very important, people, he reduces humanity to one single trait. And that's absurd in and of itself, because humanity is a basket of traits, right? And this becomes evident when you flip the script on them and you say, well, okay, if sentience is the trait, then it's okay to eat someone in a vegetative state. And in some debates, he said, well, I don't have a problem with it, talking about his personal morals and conflating that with ethics. Slick guy. Also saying that, well, the reason why we don't do it is because of familial ties or the social contract. So he starts adding other variables, right? He's done that in the past and try to confuse people. So obviously even he recognizes that humanity is a basket of different traits, different, yeah, right? It's a lot of different things. It's not just any one thing. So there are multiple reasons for why it's okay for people to eat animals, and those multiple reasons are encapsulated in this basket of humanity, right? But he has to reduce humanity to one single trait, which is a fallacy, in order to trick people. You understand? And we'll get to what that actually means to reduce humanity to one single trait, but as I'm sure a lot of you already understand. But let's point out another problem in his line of reasoning. Proposition 1. Humans are of moral value. Now, I told you in my first video that you don't have to agree with this because it's not necessarily a settled matter in philosophy, right? Or at the very least, if you will agree, which most people will because of feelings or how they feel, it would be of help to you arguing against Isaac to at least agree on a justification for why we why we agree that humans are of moral value. What are the reasons for that, right? If only because it would allow you to keep those reasons in mind and just stop on that point for just 1 second so it at the very least stays in your head. Because when you get to all these hypothetical examples that Isaac proposes, such as, eating retards or trying to justify why it's okay, that's when you say, no, retard, it's not okay to eat a retard because you yourself, Proposition 1, said, and we agreed, that humans are of moral value. And for you to now stray away from that, you are logically inconsistent, right? If that's part and parcel of your argument, that's the number one premise. However you get there, if that's the premise and we agree on it, without this premise, your argument cannot work. You can't all of a sudden, because it's convenient, say that a retard is not of moral value after you said that humans are of moral value. Right? Logical inconsistency, something that Isaac hates so much in his opponents, right? Without that logical inconsistency, his argument doesn't make any work. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work. But that's exactly what happens when you stack fallacies on top of fallacies on top of fallacies. Your argument becomes, just a bunch of fucking fallacies. And it's easy to expose if you really stop and think about what's happening. You understand? Now, let's talk about reducing and reducing humanity to one single trait, which is a very dangerous ideology. And you'll notice this in debates. Vegan Gates will say this, Gaines will say this, as well as, I believe, Ask Yourself, said something like that in the past as well. Basically, one of the statements they make is, I either want animals to get more rights, or I want to take rights away from people. That's what they say, right? They want to reduce humanity, or bring, or give animals more of a legal status or moral status, or however you want to phrase it, right? Which is one and the same, right? Because if you lower one, you increase the other, right? They go hand in hand, yin and yang. So that's exactly what they're trying to do. They want to take away your rights. They want to lower you. They want to diminish humanity. Basically down to a single trait: sentience, feces, feelings, right? And if you listen to vegans spew their ideology, you will hear things such as rape. They love to talk about rape. They love to talk about murder. They also love to talk about cannibalism, as well as antinatalism, which seems to be another movement evolving from the vegan movement, right? Minimize suffering, says veganism. Antinatalism, which means basically no more babies, wants to eliminate suffering altogether. So it's a natural progression of veganism, an evil ideology that is designed, and I'm not saying that Isaac knows this, he could just be a useful idiot, but this ideology of veganism, in my opinion, was designed to take away your human rights and reduce you to an emotional being, at least in the case of ask yourself, or to reduce humanity to a single trait, right? Sentience, suffering. And little by little, if you start reducing people, their humanity, you start reducing them to less and less, well, and you reduce them to something so base as feelings, and then you just concentrate on the negative feelings, right? You keep going down that rabbit hole. Eventually, what you end up with is no more people. You understand? So, I'm not saying that everyone who's a vegan obviously follows this sort of line of reasoning, but these ideologies, like communism, for example, the people that are behind them are very intelligent people. So to see these smart, intelligent people like Hawkins, I think is his name, right? Push blatant and obvious fallacies, basically nonsense, well, you have to start questioning why. Why are they doing that? But anyway, that's a topic for another video. Name the Trait is just a basket of fallacies that tries to reduce the basket of traits, that is humanity, to one trait. And from there, if you decide to go in that direction, well, that one single trait just might evolve or devolve into nothing. Nihilism is a very potent ideology, and I don't know too much about its history, but it leads to generally millions and millions and millions of people dying. Okay? So keep that in mind. I don't know how aware Isaac is of any of this, but he for damn sure is dead wrong, and his Name the Trait line of reasoning, if you could call it that, has been completely debunked and exposed as nothing more than a whole bunch of bullshit. At any rate, I think I'm gonna go chop this cock's head off. Oh wait, I think I already did.